Chapter 33. The iciness that Alice had detected in Helena's voice over the phone 3 nights earlier had, quite frankly, been noticeable long before that isolated conversation in which Alice had appealed to her friend once again for deliverance from yet another dire set of circumstances. The tension had been creeping steadily into their long-standing friendship over the past few years, having perhaps started with Alice's unwitting involvement with the then-married Eduardo Candelas. It had only progressed with Alice's own mother's engagement to the newly divorced said gentleman and her tragic suicide shortly thereafter. It had worsened considerably when Alice had then not only been stalked by Eduardo Candelas, but also had lost her beloved cat in the whole sordid affair. When after an interminable 2-month disappearance, during which time Alice had been reduced to an unabashed basket case, her missing cat had returned home, but only to reveal that Alice had neglected to have her spayed beforehand. Rising to the occasion with, let it be said, a not unwarranted degree of exasperation, Helena had agreed to take one of the unwanted kittens into her own home. Understandably, Helena's patience was wearing thin when it came to matters involving Alice and her penchant for attracting a seemingly endless cavalcade of problems into her life. However, it was when Helena herself took the liberty of staging an intervention in the hope of thwarting Alice and Jean-Noel's marriage plans, and all because of her own inability to give credence to the importance of the green ray, that Alice felt it was Helena for a change who had gone too far. Small wonder it would seem that relations had been worsening steadily between them for quite some time. Sadly enough, even Blaise, who had always played such an integral part in Alice's life, was of late receding into the background. Having started school that same year, the child's weekends were now filled with novel new friends and activities that easily took precedence over a mere ride on the, by then, far more prosaic carousel on the Santa Monica Pier. The waning presence of her best friend and her godchild was compounded by the bittersweet drawing to a close of even the biology program at Santa Monica College, where Alice and Jean-Noel had first met. Satisfactorily completing the required coursework, she would therefore need to transfer elsewhere to continue her studies of flora and fauna. Glancing in the rearview mirror while en route to the meditation garden with the natural spring-fed lake, Alice gratefully beheld Jean-Noel lying stretched out contentedly in his red corduroy bathrobe and clutching in his lap the exotic spray of orchids that he had brought home with him from the hospital but forgotten in the back seat. Realizing that he was fast becoming the only constant in her otherwise volatile life upon whom she could depend, Alice shuddered to think of his recent brush with death. Fervently, Alice wished that they could just go away together, and not merely for a fanciful visit to a pet cemetery in Paris, as Jean-Noel had recently suggested. Alice wished they could pack up and go away with their 3 cats, Dulcinea, Laertes, and Ophelia, to a place with broader horizons and views less restrictive than those of her basement apartment in the Sovereign Hotel. She wished also that they could all start a new life someplace else where they could settle down and maybe even raise their own exotic orchids if they felt like it, or even horses if they were so inclined. But alas, as inviting as these wishes seemed on the surface, Alice knew deep inside that this could never be, for Jean-Noel had been groomed his whole life to become a dentist and to, at some point, take over Nathalie Dubois' dental practice. From the vantage point of his tiny bedroom window on the second story of the Windmill Chapel, the barrel-chested monastic with the Gallic accent observed Alice as she comfortably situated Jean-Noel on a cement bench in the courtyard, with the little black cat purring complacently, no doubt, in his lap. The monk then watched as Alice departed out the gate and repaired on foot to weed beside the stretch of fencing that ran along the treacherous curve of Sunset Boulevard that attempted bravely to shield the grounds from the encroaching inharmonies of the outside world. No sooner had Alice disappeared, however, than Jean-Noel did an unexpected thing. Placing his head in his hands, he then appeared to sob uncontrollably. Pavlova, with lightning speed, flew to his side and placed her arm around his convulsing shoulders, but to no avail. As near as the monk could ascertain, Jean-Noel could no longer see her. Pavlova, perplexed by this new development, then glared directly in the direction of the monk's tiny bedroom window, locked her gaze with his, and impatiently jerked her head in such a way as to suggest, nay, to command, that he should come immediately to Jean-Noel's assistance. Taking his cue from the diminutive yet forceful ballerina, the monk carefully descended the spiral staircase from his room and then made his way in haste to Jean-Noel. He would bring the clearly distraught boy back to the kitchen in the Windmill Chapel and put on the kettle for tea.